Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Career Chat. I'm your host, Shannon Crooks, and I'm a librarian three at the Hillcrest Heights branch of the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. On today's show, we have Barry Robinson, also known as Barrington Lee, which is his performance name, and he is an opera singer out of New York City, and he is going to tell us about his career. Hopefully, teens and adults, this career chat inspires you to look at maybe a career that you have thought about or may have been interested in. I know in these unprecedented times, a lot of people are unemployed and maybe are thinking about a career change. So, hopefully, this will inspire you and motivate you to consider a career as a professional opera singer. So, hello, Barrington. How are
Hi
you?
there. I'm well. I'm well.
So tell us why you go by the stage name Barrington Lee, because I've always known you as Barry Robinson.
So I yes. So okay. In like you said, you've always known me as Barry Robinson, and for the beginning, I would say about 10 years of my career, I was known as Barry L. Robinson, baritone.
Hmm.
And so in 2017, I decided to make a vocal fach, which is FACH.
Hmm.
It's a German system of vocal categories. So, we have baritone, we have bass,
Hmm.
baritone, tenor, mezzo, soprano, and soprano. And
Hmm.
so within those categories, there are like finite, specific vocal fachs. So you can be like a certain type of bass or a certain type of baritone or a certain type of soprano. And so in 2017, I switched from being a baritone, which I had some moderate success singing baritone repertoire, but my voice was always a little heavier, bigger, and I had and just kind of the color was a little different than a regular baritone. So
Hmm.
I switched to being a bass baritone, and bass baritones sing specific repertoire also. Sometimes can be a little more dramatic depending on if you're a lighter baritone or a heavier baritone, bass baritone. So I switched to a bass baritone, and so then I said, well, if I'm switching my fach, then what's a very international name? And so a friend of mine used to always call me Barrington,
Hmm.
always from day one, from like 2002 when I first met her. And so I switched it to Barrington Lee, and
Hmm.
she's just like, I just think that because you act like a Barrington. And I
Hmm.
was like, oh, okay, whatever. So I switched it to Barrington Lee. And the crazy thing, as soon as I switched my name to Barrington Lee, um, it was so well received that like I started getting work everywhere. It was really, really strange to me. But you know how people are with when they think something is a little more, fashionable or international, then they think that they should jump on it. Yeah.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about your career duties, your job duties, and responsibilities as an opera singer.
So my job as an opera singer is to show up prepared for my job
Hmm.
with all of my notes learned and the words memorized.
Hmm.
And so that's really career duties. So it's because it's in the arts, you have a director who, when I show up to a job and I have been cast in a role, and I show up, I already have some kind of I've done my studying. I know who this character, I know about the opera. I know who the character is. I I know his relationships to his other characters in the show.
Hmm.
I have already come to formulate my relationships in a way, be it intimate, personal, or if I'm not, into that person, like, angry. So the problem, not a problem, the blessing being
Hmm.
a bass baritone with my voice type is that I'm always cast as the villain.
Hmm.
And so, but the problem is I've been told that I have a pretty voice, like it's a very beautiful sound. So then I can sing various types of things,
Hmm.
but as far as in my repertoire, so I don't always have to be the bad guy,
Hmm.
but usually I am the bad guy. So then it's my job to show up, um, knowing who, what, where, when, and why about me.
Mm.
And what made me, because no one is ever just a villain. No one is ever just a love. Like, it's like, what made you that? And so I like to show up to a job knowing my backstory, be it it's either written out somewhere or it's created by me.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing my backstory, that way I can relate to my characters in the show. And you show up to a job knowing that information, that's called the work.
Yeah.
So that means you show up knowing who you are, what you're doing, where you are, like all those things. That's the work that you do before you get to your job.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to the job, and then the director is like, nope, I don't like that. So, and then you have to, like, go back. It's a dialogue, so you have to go back and forth with the person and say, well, what do you think about this? And if they say, well, I like this, and you say, well, why is that? Can we talk about that, because I see it this way? And most of the time you'll have a director who is open to, and it's like, oh, I actually didn't think about it that way, or, oh, that makes this person a little more human, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to being a stock character or a stock villain.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I show up to the job, I know my music. I have coached it, which
Mm-hmm.
means I go to someone, I have paid someone to make sure that I know the pitches and the rhythms. I have paid someone who knows the style of the music. That way I can go in and I know how to do phrasing. I know what the performance practice of something is. This is what gets into when people are like, oh, you're an opera singer. Oh, it's a hobby. No, I have a master's degree. And I have a master's degree because it's like, it's whatever, like you're a librarian or someone is an accountant. They went to school for that, to know the technique of those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same thing with opera singers who have studied, like, the technique of what you're doing. And there's a whole performance history of all of that comes down to you, that you're like, I have to do the work now to figure out, if this person did it this way and this person did it this way, well, I like how this person did it, but I also like a couple of things that this person did. How can I make this my own, as opposed to trying to imitate what someone else is doing?
And usually opera is done in a different language, correct? When you're singing opera.
Correct. So opera is in every language, right? So there are operas in every language. We have operas in English,
Mm-hmm.
Italian, German, French, Russian, Czech, Spanish, Swedish. Like if there's a vernacular, there's an opera in it. In fact, in the 40s, the 30s, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, there was this whole thing about people singing operas in their native language. And so you would take, like, Bizet's Carmen, Georges Bizet's Carmen, which is a very famous opera that everyone is, everyone knows that aria because it's on every commercial, right? So there are recordings of a soprano who's German singing Carmen in German.
Wow.
And an Italian tenor singing Carmen, singing Don Jose in Italian. And they're in the same production singing it together, because they have come from different places and they're singing in their native languages. And that happens whenever there's a jump in, like someone got sick and then someone has to jump in and they only know it in their language. And so, even today, like, I sing in I've sung in, of course, Italian, English, German, French, Czech, and Russian.
Wow.
And I speak a little bit of German and some Italian. My sung French is great. My spoken French is terrible. But of course, these are languages we had to study. The standard languages that we study in school are Italian, French, and German. And then it's very interesting because I'm American. So it is, in the opera system of the world, being an American, it is stated like we have to sing in every language, right? So a lot of people who are Italian mostly only sing Italian operas. They may sing something in French. German singing in German, they sing in French. French people sing in French. They may sing in Italian, but they sing in French. So it's really But as an American, it is our job to sing in all the languages. So like I have Russian arias, I have, German arias, I have French arias, I have, Italian, I have English arias. And then the craziest thing is that in school, in conservatory, when you're studying languages, or we have them vocal diction classes, you
Mm-hmm.
start with Italian,
Mm-hmm.
then you do German, then
Mm-hmm.
you do French, and then the last one is English. And
Mm.
English is the hardest language to sing in
What?
for an opera singer. It is the hardest language because we have so many, like, they're dialects, but then the words are like crazy, and like, and that's why you hear, when you hear an opera singer singing and they're singing in English, and you're like, why does this sound so weird? Because they would sing like my country, like all these really weird things, and they're rolling R's and blah blah blah, because it's like we're singing, like, why are we doing that? Like, just singing in English. And so you
Wow.
have to be taught how to make sure that you're singing something in English the correct way. And
That's
then on top of that, like when you're singing in Italian, like when you're singing in English, because there are so many dialects and so many operas are written, we have so many American operas that are written. And so you have like Carlisle Floyd's Susanna.
mm-hmm.
And so that opera takes place in like, it's like hillbilly. It takes place in the mountains and stuff. So then you have to have like that Southern twang in your singing.
What?
And right, or if it, like it really is dialect based, so we have to learn those dialects.
Wow, that is
Yeah.
so interesting. Wow. So you talked a little bit about your education. So what was your educational path from high school to now?
So I'm originally from Greenville, South Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
and when I graduated high school, I had started. So in high school, so I played the violin for 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
from middle school to high school. My last year of high school, I was accepted to the Fine Arts Center here in
Well,
Greenville, South Carolina.
we both went there.
Yes, and so I was there for voice and for theater,
Mhm,
and so I studied voice there. And there, I kind of, like, I wasn't the best singer. I
mhm,
had a voice.
mhm,
My high school chorus teacher really pushed me to
mhm,
like pursue music. He thought that I had a spectacular voice.
mhm,
And but I was in an after school program, which a lot of Black kids were. Like, if you were like kind of talented, there was this program called the Phyllis Wheatley Repertory Theater for Youth,
mhm,
and they did huge productions all around. They like we traveled, did big shows, and they were always sold out. Very talented group of kids,
mhm,
and so I enjoyed performing, but I still was shy in a way that I didn't like singing solos because I didn't feel like my voice was that great.
mhm,
So my chorus teacher pushing me, pushing me, pushing me, he really wanted me to study music. So my
mhm.
mom refused to let me go far away from school my first year in college because I'm the baby. So I had to go to a Christian college in South Carolina by the name of then Anderson College, now Anderson University. So I
Mhm,
went there for 1 year
mhm,
to appease her,
mhm,
and then I auditioned for the North Carolina School of the Arts.
mhm.
So I ended up going there, and that was when I was in my first ever opera. I was a freshman, and I was in the chorus of this opera called, oh shoot, what was it? Because in French, oh gosh, it's like one of those Shakespeare plays. I can't remember it now, but anyway, so it may come to me. So I was in this opera, and which is gonna kill me now. It's gonna get on my nerves because I see everything. And it was the first time I was in like a cost. Like, I had been on stage before, right? But this was like very different because it was like opera, lights,
Mhm,
big crazy costumes, makeup, and I was like, this is so cool. Like,
mhm,
I want to do this.
mhm,
And so I ended up really trying to focus on that. And
mhm,
I decided that, being a Black man going to a school in North Carolina where Black people in general were treated as if we weren't talented.
mhm,
So this was in almost every department.
mhm,
Um, And so I said, this is not, how am I going to get any better when the teachers aren't invested in me? So
Mhm.
I decided to audition for Juilliard and Manhattan School of Music. I
Mhm.
made it to the final round at Juilliard.
Mhm.
And I was accepted into Manhattan School of Music. So I was like, well, I guess I'm going to Manhattan School of Music. And I went there, and that's where it kind of like jumped off, where I got my big boy voice, where I started singing, and that was my undergrad. I
Mhm.
graduated from there in 2005,
Mhm.
and I went to Rice University in Houston, Texas, for my master's degree.
Mhm.
And since then, I've been singing, here, Europe, South America.
Mhm.
I did some ensemble work. I sang in the chorus of Houston Grand Opera
Mhm.
for 2 seasons while I was doing my master's degree.
Mhm.
I sang some festivals, some chorus in festivals, until one day, my old voice, one of my English vocal lit teacher was doing some coaching. She was coaching us, and I was doing this summer festival at Bard in upstate New York, in Annandale on Hudson.
Mhm.
And she was there as
Mhm.
the English diction coach for this opera that I was in.
Mhm.
And she kept hearing me, and she said, and so she walked up to me after one of the first rehearsals, and she said, no more chorus.
Mm.
You need to be singing solo stuff. And I said,
Wow.
oh, okay. And then after that, I said, no more chorus and only sang solo stuff.
Wow. That is so interesting. So when you say you got your master's, specifically, what is your master's in?
It's in classical voice performance. It's a
Okay.
master of music. Yeah.
Okay. Wow, so cool. So she discovered you essentially.
I mean, yes, she just kind of was like, you can't continue to sing in the chorus because you sound better than the people who are singing who have like lead roles. So you need to start singing, focus more on that as opposed to back chorus, background singing. And there's nothing wrong with having a choral career at all. I mean, there are some great singers who sing, and they just for whatever reason love that ensemble feel, or they love that job security depending
Mhm.
on where you're singing. And they love like to get to, because there are people who are professional choristers who just love singing in choirs. And
Mhm.
I enjoy singing in choirs, but I love listening to beautiful choral singing. I just love listening to a group of people coming together to make a gorgeous sound.
Mhm.
But with me, I have always been a storyteller. And
Mhm.
so to be able to tell a story with my voice to bring the audience into me
Mhm.
has always been something that has, made me feel like, gosh, this is what I am born to do.
Mhm. Wow.
Yeah.
So it sounds like being a professional opera singer, you have to be an actor and a singer and be able to communicate a story in a different language most of the time. That is incredibly interesting.
Right.
Wow. Wow. So interesting. So, Barry or Barrington, let me use your professional name.
Okay.
What
Wait, so hold on. It's so funny because my friends who have known me my entire life, whenever I've been singing somewhere and people only know me as Barrington and they see me out somewhere and they're like, Barrington, Barrington. And my best friends like always start giggling and laughing because they're like, who is Barry? Because they haven't always, I'm Barry. So yeah, but even sometimes if the people like call me Barrington, Barrington, Barry, but if we come kind of close, and I was like, just call me Barry, it's okay.
Mhm.
Because Barry could be short for Barrington. I've always got, what is Barry short for? And I was like, I was named after Barry White. My dad loved
I
Barry
remember
White.
that story.
Yes, my dad loved Barry White, and I was named after Barry White.
Wow. And now you're a singer, just like
Right,
Barry White. That
right.
is so cool. So, what obstacles did you face in the pursuit of your profession?
Ooh, goodness gracious. Huh. Like I said before, um, when I was at North Carolina School of the Arts, but it kind of started a little before then. I mentioned that I wasn't always the best singer, right?
Mm.
And so because singing along with sports and all, like in any profession, there's some kind of judgment, like there is a level that people put you against something as far as like your ability. And
Mhm.
so I worked hard, but I didn't have all the tools. So like, anyone who can do something like, and I'll get into this a little later when it comes to being African American in this art form, right?
Mhm.
So we were privileged to go to the Fine Arts Center,
Mhm.
right? But the thing about the people who did not, who were able to do that, so they went to college, they went in a high school and they went off to college, and so they've never taken piano, they don't know anything about reading music and stuff, and they go off to these schools and
Mhm.
they're expected, because they're white or
Mhm.
colleagues have done that for whatever, however long, and so we're expected to know that and be at that level or catch up kind of quick.
Mhm.
And so, and growing up, when I first went off to college, I had some really rough times. I remember may he rest in peace, and he like reconciled himself with me, Michael Rice,
Mhm.
from the Fine Arts Center.
Mhm.
Um, when I went off to college to Anderson, I reached out to him and said, "Hey, I am going to apply to North Carolina School of the Arts,
Mhm.
and I would love it if you would write a recommendation letter for me if you feel comfortable."
Mhm.
And he said, "Oh, absolutely." And I
Mhm.
said, "Okay, perfect."
Mhm.
So a couple of other people wrote recommendation letters for me. So I got accepted to North Carolina School of the Arts. I'm
Mhm.
working as my work study in the bursar's office, or in admissions.
Mhm.
And so, I'm filing away stuff in the files and blah, blah, blah. And so my file is there. So I'm like, oh, let me look at my files. So I'm looking at it, and there are my recommendation letters.
Mhm.
And my recommendation letter from Michael Rice was recommending them not to accept me. And if they did, to not have his name attached to me, because he didn't feel that I was talented enough to go to that school.
Wow.
I was devastated,
Mm.
completely devastated. Now, fast forward to today, being a person who is also a teacher who has taught and
Mhm.
had to write recommendation letters for people.
Mhm.
If a student reaches out to me and says, "Hey, I'm auditioning for X, Y, and Z. Can you write me a recommendation letter?"
Mhm.
I want to know, what is it? What is it? Like, what are they doing? Do I feel that they are at that level to do that? And if I don't feel that, then I say, unfortunately, I can't write your recommendation letter, because, as we've discussed, you have these things to work on.
Mhm.
And it depends on the level of the thing. But if it's just to get into a school, yes, you write a recommendation letter. I think that this person is a promising talent.
Mhm.
There's work to be done, blah, blah, blah. There are ways to do that. But to recommend someone not, and that their name not be attached, because he had several students go there,
Mhm.
was very, very shocking to me. So I had that happen. And it took years later when I got into Manhattan School of Music. And I think someone mentioned it to him. And so he, like, we were, back then we still had AOL chat on
Mhm.
AIM, because it was like you signed into AOL. So he was always on there. So he mentioned to me, so like he popped in, and so he was, and I said, "Hey, Mr. Rice," and he goes, "Hey, what's going on, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Well, I'm going to Manhattan School of Music," and he was like, "Barry Robinson?" And I said, "Yeah." And he was like, "Oh, wow." And so that was kind of it. And then I had a mutual friend, LaFrederick Holtzner, who was
Mhm.
a singer, and he was doing it. He would always come home, because he went to Juilliard. He would always come home and do these concerts.
Mhm.
So LaFrederick invited me to come home to sing on one of these concerts with him. So I came back I was home in town, so I went to sing, and Mr. Rush was playing these concerts for him.
Mhm.
So we go there to the church to sing, to rehearse, and he starts playing, and I open my mouth and start singing, and he stops playing the piano. And
Mhm.
it's just like, and I turn, I say, "Something wrong?" And he was like, "Oh, no, 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 no." And he looks down, and then he like says, "Okay, can we start it again?" And I said, "Sure." So he starts again. I sing the entire thing.
Mhm.
And the next day for the concert, we were standing backstage about to go on. And
Mhm.
he grabbed my hand and says, "I want to apologize to you.
Wow.
I was so wrong about your talent.
Mhm.
And I think that you are spectacular. Like, I have to apologize." He didn't say what for, and I
Mhm.
knew what for,
Mhm.
but that apology meant a lot. And after that, he like contacted me all the time. Like he was like, "What are you doing? Like, how was your studying going?" Blah blah. It was like I became one of the favorite, the chosen ones that he had already had.
Mhm.
And then he even played my master's audition tape, because back then we had VHS tapes. I don't know
Mhm.
if people know what that is today, but but he had a VHS player and he had recorded. So he recorded my master's audition for Rice University in his studio at the Fine Arts Center,
Mhm.
and then he really like, it was a very shock. And I think that, so it taught me, I'm sure it taught him a lesson, but it taught me not to like discount people,
Mhm.
because you never know like their drive or their, like how much they would do something, really fight for us. And then, that was one. And then when I was at North Carolina School of the Arts, I had a very bad teacher, and she was quite mean. And you come across this in this profession too, singers who are failed for whatever reason in their career, and then they start teaching, and then they take their whatever out on their students. And so she definitely like mistreated me quite badly and told me that I could never sing, that I had a terrible voice and I would never be anything. And this is like my teacher whom I going to, and like, because you have to, when you're a student and you're young and impressionable, like you really are trying to build a bond with someone who you feel like it's going to be on your team,
Mhm.
who is going to really like push you and like really stand for you. And this wasn't the case. So and she did as much as she possibly could to see me fail.
Mhm.
And then but I had to like really get out of that. And so I was able to like audition for Manhattan School of Music and go away, and like people were like, "Oh my gosh, you're amazing." And it was very a night and day difference
Mhm.
from being a Black man in North Carolina with a white teacher who was telling me these terrible things about myself, to having another teacher who was also white, and we were like, "Your voice is spectacular." You know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Mhm.
And like knowing what to do with my talent, and like really, really, really pushing. And I also say that like I had the drive. I really enjoyed singing, and I loved, like, again, telling a story. And it took a while to learn how to tell a story, because it's something that people don't teach you.
Mhm.
People are mostly focused on the technique of singing,
Mhm.
but like telling the story is, the best thing ever. It's like even in regular music, like, you know, I feel like a person like Aretha Franklin, or all the like Gladys Knight, and like I named these great singers from back in the day, right? Or like even today, like I could listen to Fantasia Barrino sing the phone book,
Mhm.
because she tells a story every time she opens her mouth. Like
Mhm.
she is in it,
Mhm.
in whatever world she has created. She
Mhm.
is in that world to sing to you and tell you the story and bring you in.
Mhm.
So
Awesome.
yeah, so that was, so my training, like, I definitely had those kind of things growing. But I mean, a lot of opera singers have had that, and
Mhm.
some of them may have been the golden ones who went straight on,
Mhm.
but some of us of color, um, Black people and other people of color,
Mhm.
sometimes have a bit of a struggle when it comes to us, because we're in an art form that we have always been in,
Mhm.
since the late 1800s. We have always been in this art form. People don't know that, but
Mhm.
we have always been. As a librarian, I want to give you some information that you're going to be like, "What are you talking about?" But like we have been in this art form since the late 1800s,
Wow.
singing everywhere.
Wow.
And but you don't hear a lot about us, because even it just took recently, the past 10 years, like, we had a few people on stage here in the States, past 20, 30, 40, 50 years, with some great names. But there have been others who have still been singing small roles in small companies. But we're really pushing, especially like this past summer, and a lot of people getting great positions in opera companies, because we're not being hired. So if people are on the other side of who are casting us, who aren't casting us because we're not represented on the administration side, then
Mhm.
how are we going to always be on the stage? So
Mhm.
we're really fighting and working for that too.
Mhm. So great points you brought up, Barry. And viewers, if you're listening, maybe you are in school right now, maybe you're a high school student, and maybe there is a fine arts center like the one that Barry and I went to. It might be a good idea for you to try to audition for something like that, just so that you can be exposed to different areas of the arts and possibly get into this as a career. Also, you may come across teachers or different people along the way that are trying to push you down or keep you down, such as the ones that Barry mentioned. And you really have to find it within yourself, believe in yourself to push forward and to keep trying to do what you can do in your career. And hopefully, like Barry said, there'll be that one person that believes in you and pushes you to the next level, but you have to believe in yourself first.
Right.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful. So I wanted to also ask you, what type of advice do you have for young people who want to get into this career besides what I've talked about with getting into a fine arts center or some type of music program?
Um, I would say, so with me, it started with chorus,
Mm-hmm.
right? It started with choir, and a lot of great singers come from choral backgrounds. And so I would say study, listen, listen, listen. So my first time ever, like, I would go to the library here in Greenville when I was in middle school and high school mostly, and and go to the opera classical section and like get an opera and it was kind of weird to me because it still wasn't like something that I was like, it was very interesting. But we used to have a competition here in Greenville during February where it was a spiritual competition, and it was always held at I can't remember the Springfield Baptist Church, I think it was, and and it was a and it was for the region. It was for like Greenville County, and so I remember in eighth grade or
Mm-hmm.
ninth grade, it was high school. I was in high school then. And so I went there. I did it 2 years. The first year, I don't think I placed. And the second year, I placed second to the person from the Fine Arts Center.
Mm-hmm.
And the person was Courtney Allen.
Mm-hmm.
She was first place winner, and I placed second. And I remember this, and I tell the story because this story really did it changed my view of classical singing with Black people,
Mm-hmm.
because I won a little bit of scholarship money.
Mm-hmm.
It's like $500 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the teacher gave me, when they did we had like an award ceremony, and I remember getting my first ever classical CD that was given to me, and it was a spiritual CD by Jesse Norman.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesse Norman, for you guys who don't know, Jesse Norman was a very, very, very famous African American soprano. She was from Augusta, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
She had a spectacular career here in the States, but mostly abroad in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
She sang a lot of repertoire. She was a Black Wagnerian, which is Richard Wagner is a composer who composes these huge works, crazy, expansive works, long 5 hour, 6 hour operas.
Mm-hmm.
But like it's a very specialized that has only and mostly been championed by white singers
Mm-hmm.
because Wagner, German, European, you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
so this woman, who's a Black woman with dark skin, beautiful woman, went in and started singing this and like changed the game with
Wow.
that repertoire. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but she pushed for Black people to sing spirituals because she said that is our music.
Mm-hmm.
African American composers, that is our music. And
Mm-hmm.
so I remember getting this CD and listening, and I was like, who is this woman? Why does she sound so beautiful? Like it just changed my mind, like about singing and the being a classical singer. And
Mm-hmm.
so I remember doing that. And then in 2000, fast forward, that had to be like 1996. So
Mm-hmm.
fast forward to 2007, 2008, I actually was contracted. Someone said, hey, Jesse Norman is singing Duke Ellington's sacred songs at St. Patrick's Cathedral
Mm-hmm.
and St. John the Divine in New York City. And she is looking for some singers to be in her choir. I know you don't sing in choirs, but I said, absolutely.
Mhm.
And so I was in rehearsal with her and I talked to her and I said, Miss Norman, because she loved young singers. And I
Mhm.
said, Miss Norman, um, I told her the story that I told you.
Mhm.
And she said, well, do you still have the CD? I said, yes, ma'am, of course I do. She said, well, I would love to see it. And I brought it to her and she was like, oh, you've had this for, like, she could tell how worn it was. And she said, and she was like, can I sign it for you? And I said,
Oh, wow.
absolutely. And she signed my CD.
Oh.
And I just was so like enthralled. So my what I would the advice I would give young singers is like, listen, even if opera, R&B, listen to great singers, right? Listen to people from the past. Not only listening to people from the future, but listen to people from the past and like pick up something, be open to new music, talk to your chorus teacher, find a voice, someone you really is inspired to be and like say, well, who is in my area who sings this way? Or, what can they tell me? Or is there a teacher that like talk to my core, like I see classical music, I say start with your choral teacher
Mhm.
because they have a little more, they went to school for that. And so they know that classical side of music. So then they could point you in a direction and say, I can give you voice lessons after school, or I can give you voice lessons during your free period, or because I had that. That's what Mr. Rice did. I mean, Mr. Hendricks did for me at Carolina. He,
Mhm.
on my whenever I had a study hall or a free period, he would come by the choral room and we would like sit. He would give me voice lessons and we would sing through things. And then fast forward 10 years later, I go back to visit him and I'm giving him voice
Wow.
lessons. So yeah, so it's really something. It really is something. I say as a young singer, listen, seek out advice, find someone, like really do like think about those things, and it starts with your teachers there, that your
Mhm.
chorus teacher, like talk to them and find out like any kind of performance opportunity, because the earlier you start performing, the less nerves you always have, right? So start trying to figure out, if even if it's an after school program, like I
Mhm.
know right now we're digital, but the world is going to open back up, soon, like in the
Mhm.
next 8 months or so, that things will be kind of semi back to normal. But
Mhm.
I would say, like any kind of performance things you can do them,
Mhm.
because then you'll, see if this is for you.
Mhm.
That will be my only thing, my only advice when it comes to that. Yeah.
That's great advice. And it makes me think back to when we were at the Fine Arts Center. I had a teacher who would always make us listen to different types of genres and try to be exposed to different types of music. And it's so important because you never know what type of music out there that you will identify with, so that you could,
Mm-hmm.
if you're a singer, you could sing it, or if you play an instrument, you could play it. And it just opened my eyes to so many different genres because, in the African American community, mostly we listen to R&B, hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really listen to any of the other genres, but going to the Fine Arts Center really opened my mind up to what's out there. And for viewers who are watching, I was a clarinet player. I didn't pursue it professionally, but the exposure I got at the Fine Arts Center really helped me see what is out there. If I wanted to pursue it, that was an option for me. I just chose to go a different way. But yes, I
and
love the Fine Arts Center. I really
and
did.
and even just with that, so I have colleagues who were instrumentalists who played, like clarinet, violin, viola, cello, like bass, and those people, and opera singers who were like, oh, I can do things and I still have my jazz roots or my gospel background, but Kanye West was like, I need some opera singers to sing on these tracks with me, or like Erica Badu or Jill Scott or blah blah. Blah. Like, I want an actual orchestra with me, so I want a black violinist, or I want a clair. Like people, like these different genres want people who are trained professionals to be able to read music, and
Mhm.
I mean, and to do all of these things. So it'll never just be one, like the more when you have that background and that like foundation, like
Mhm.
there's so many, your possibilities are like infinite. You can do as many things as you possibly can.
Mhm. Awesome. Yes, I really enjoyed, being exposed to music theory. I struggled with it, but
Oh, music theory, yes.
I know it's the foundation. sight reading or being able to play by ear, all of those things was exposure. And I know that the students that went on in those careers were appreciative of it, because sometimes, when you go, for private lessons, you don't always get exposed to those things. So,
Hmm.
yes, being able to have that exposure was extremely important. Um, so, Barry, um, where have you worked within the industry? I know you talked a little bit about working outside of the US and performing, but
So I have performed at some like a few companies in New York City, and I've never sung at the Met or City Opera
mhm,
yet. I mean, I was like everyone's goal is to always sing at the Metropolitan Opera,
mhm,
and there was an opportunity afforded, kind of, um, but I'm a solo singer.
mhm,
I have my goal is to only have a solo career, which means I am a like principal artist. We call them principal artists.
mhm,
You're a principal or you're a choral singer, or in the chorus an ensemble. And
mhm,
so, so I have principaled at like I've done, some new works, world premieres,
mhm,
big festivals in South America. I had my first big international job. Like I sang like concerts in Italy, Germany, but my big professional like debut in Europe was I sang in Deutsche Oper in Berlin in
mhm,
2012, and then from there on, I just started singing all over the place.
mhm,
And I would say in 2018, I had this like really crazy year where I was singing like back to back to back,
mhm,
and I sang, and it was my first year that I sang musical theater.
mhm,
So I had only sang opera forever and a day, was like art songs, the opera, and someone said, well, why don't you audition for this musical Oklahoma,
mhm.
and which I'm sure everyone's parents would know that musical Oklahoma. And so but it was this very cool production at the Denver Center in Denver, Colorado, which
Mhm,
is the premier big center there. And they were doing an all Black cast of Oklahoma.
mhm,
And traditionally, that is not a thing at
mhm,
all. And the backlash from some people, was very interesting for mostly white people about how dare they, it's Oklahoma. But then people need to know their history,
mhm,
because there were over 30 all Black towns in Oklahoma.
mhm,
And Oklahoma was slated to be a Black state,
mhm,
because there were so many Black settlements there from the migration up.
mhm,
So and so it made sense. So the only person who was white in the cast was the character Ali Hakam, who was like a Persian person who comes in. He's like a carpetbagger who comes in selling things all the time. And
mhm,
it was an amazing show, and it was my first ever venture into musical theater.
mhm,
And great success, because musical theater and opera are very different. Like the acting is very different. The voice, you don't have to sing as like operatically all the time. And it was very different for me. And it really showed me that I can act. Like I had already gotten acclaim for my acting, but then when it came to that one, it was like, oh wow, you really are an actor.
mhm,
Um, and then so then that was my first. And then my second the next summer, I sang Camelot. So
mhm,
I was King Arthur,
mhm,
and I was in for Charlottesville Opera. We all know about Charlottesville. So
mhm,
Charlottesville Opera did this production of Camelot, and I am the first Black ever King Arthur on any professional stage,
mhm,
and that was very different and interesting for me. It was a lot of fun. It was stressful because I would say 74% of the opera I'm talking. It's
mhm.
dialogue. It's like it's like all like it's like a full play, and then
Wow.
they're singing. So that stretched me. So then that definitely like made me like, oh wow, like oh my goodness, this is so crazy. Like how can I do this? And how am I going to memorize all these lines? And so because that's the thing, like in opera you show up things, and sometimes in musical theater, which was very different for me. Like I showed up to my musical theater job, and I was like, oh my gosh, I had to memorize everything. And they said, no. And I
Mm,
was like, well, what do you mean? It was like, know your pitches, know your music. You
mhm,
need to know your songs,
mhm,
but the work is actually with your castmates in building a character with everyone around you. And it
mm,
was very different because in opera, you have to show up knowing everything.
mhm,
And in musical theater, yes, you know your lines, but people they work, but because they work so quickly and they know their lines come quickly to them. And
mhm,
so, and I saw that um, because I definitely showed up and I said, well, I have to know some of my lines. So, I skimmed them and got familiar with them. But there was one of the people in my cast who was one of the leads. And I'm going to say they, because I don't want to like,
put them out there.
put them out there, but
Mhm,
they had memorized everything and they memorized everything and they had already put a character on themselves. So whenever they had to relate to other people, they
mhm,
were already in their own world and it didn't make any sense. And
mm,
that was from day one in the table reading when
mhm,
they were the director was like, just read it like you're reading a story. Don't put any accents on, don't do just read it.
mhm,
And they were like full on acting, doing it. And the director kept stopping that person and saying, absolutely not. I need you to read it like you're reading to a child. I don't
mm,
need you to, this is a table reading. This is not, you need to show me that you are like, and it took them a while, even through the course of the show, to really like start relating to other people because they had already put in their brain how they should be because they had rehearsed it so much.
mhm,
And it taught me a lesson in there because when I went to the Camelot musical, and I was, I it was a lot of dialogue, and so I tried to take what I had did there into there, and it was successful in a way, but because it was a shorter rehearsal period, like I felt that I was behind with the actual like lines,
mhm,
um but my colleagues were like, the director was nervous because I showed up and didn't really know all my lines, but my
mhm,
colleagues were like, how is it that you went home, we did these two scenes
mhm,
and we're going to revisit them tomorrow, and you didn't know them and you went home and you came back the next day and knew them, and we could, and I was like, well, because I did my work and I can, now that I have what you're doing, I can relate to how I'm saying my lines. And so it's easier to do it that way.
mhm,
And I learned that that is a trick that a lot of people in the industry, in musical theater and in film and television do. Like,
mm,
of course, when they show up with their lines, but then like it's easier to memorize them once you know the reaction of your colleague on stage, because you're
oh,
like, oh, that person is saying this, of course I'm going to say this, you know what I
mhm,
mean? So
mhm,
so I would say, it's that kind of a thing about being prepared and traveling and doing these things. So I've gotten to actually be in different places, and I'm happy that I actually was able to move into some musical theater stuff because then it opened up a lot of doors. Then the pandemic happened, so
mhm,
everything was like stopped. Like
mhm,
Broadway doesn't come back. Broadway's been closed now for almost a year, a little over a year now. They'll be back in the fall, hopefully. Fingers
mhm,
crossed.
mhm.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
that was actually my next question. How has COVID changed things for your career?
Um, so it's been rough. Um, things are Companies are starting to do things, a few things online. Major companies have closed its doors until like the vaccine has happened and those things are happening. But there are some companies in Europe that are fully open, which is very strange to me because then they have to shut down every time someone gets COVID.
Mhm,
But everything is kind of turned digital. So there are lots of companies have jumped to doing recitals online, or like with mega stars, or like small projects online, as opposed to like they can't do a full scale opera,
mhm,
especially here in the States, in the US. But in Europe, it's a little different. But I have taken this time to work on something that's very different and near and dear to me.
mhm,
So I have been toying with this idea of starting my own foundation
mm,
and or society. We're still tossing it up in the air. Um, but this is what I was telling you as a librarian. It's going to blow your mind. So when we think of American opera in the States, we think of people from like maybe the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I can't remember if, let me see, I think the opera, it was a musical really, but the opera Porgy and Bess was written, let's see, Porgy, because I don't really sing that opera. So I
Mm-hmm.
really, to tell you the truth, don't do. So it premiered in 1935, right? So it was a musical kind of that premiered in 1935, and but it was opera singers who started singing it. So think about this. So that was written by George Gershwin, George and Ira Gershwin,
Mm-hmm.
Jewish men, um, about Black people in their lives. They went to Charleston, South Carolina, and observed Black people in their daily lives and wrote an opera about it. I
Mm-hmm.
have my own problems with that, but that's me.
Mm-hmm.
So some of my other colleagues the same, but that opera has afforded a lot of Black people the ability to perform, to get a paycheck for years and years and years. So that has been the only opera that has been around that people have been talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in 2015, I did this opera called Voodoo by this composer, Harry Lawrence Freeman.
Mm-hmm.
Harry Lawrence Freeman had been writing operas, Black man had been writing operas since 1896.
Wow.
He is the only American
Mm-hmm.
who has ever written an opera, English American operas, since
Mm-hmm.
then. There
Mm-hmm.
was one white man who wrote an opera maybe 10 years before him, but it was in Italian, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but this is the man who is writing American operas about not only Black people,
Mm-hmm.
but Native Americans,
Mm-hmm.
Mexicans, because a lot of some of the things were Mexican American War,
Mm-hmm.
um, white people in their lives, which is very interesting for Black people to be commenting in that time period on white people in their lives. He had been writing operas since then,
Mm-hmm.
1896.
Mm-hmm.
One of his operas premiered at Chicago World's Fair in 1903 or whatever, and it was.
Mm-hmm.
He was the first man to have uh, um, his full opera Voodoo performed on national radio.
Mm-hmm.
There in at Carnegie Hall, one of his operas in 1920s at
Wow.
Carnegie Hall. You know,
Wow.
and we don't know anything about this person. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and his catalog is vast, like full on huge, because I talked about Wagner in the beginning with these huge operas that he wrote. So he looked up to that writing and he wrote on that scale.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife was a soprano.
Mm-hmm.
His son was a baritone. He started the Negro Grand Opera in Harlem
Oh, I
in
love him.
1923.
Wow.
In
I
1923, right?
wow.
And so we don't. So I am in the process of starting with his grandniece,
Mm-hmm.
um, the Harry Lawrence Freeman Foundation,
Mm-hmm.
and it's to preserve his work because a lot of his work now is at the Columbia Rare Books Library, but there's some that may be at Howard and a couple other places, and to preserve his work and have it recopywritten and then performed, educate people, because he really is the father or the grandfather of American opera, and we don't know anything about him because he's a Black man.
What's his name again?
Harry
Harry,
Lawrence Freeman.
Harry Lawrence. I'm gonna write that down. Wow, that is so interesting.
Right.
Oh.
And I mean, it is like, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Having gotten a master's degree
Mm-hmm.
from from a distinguished Manhattan School of Music, people who went to Juilliard, who know nothing about this man
Mm-hmm.
and to his contribution to American opera. In fact, this is very controversial that because Richard Wagner was very known, there's an opera Tristan und Isolde, or Tristan and Isolde, and
Mm-hmm.
there is this very famous Tristan chord that you probably learned about in school in music theory.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that Tristan chord was already in one of Harry Lawrence Freeman's operas before Wagner wrote it.
What?
Right. Right.
Wow.
Black people and excellence. And
Mhm.
the thing about this man is that, yes, he was this first composer person and had his own opera company, but he also wrote his operas. He wrote his libretti, which are the stories.
Mhm.
Like he was a dramaturg. He wrote what he wanted to be, costume design, and he also gave other Black people jobs in doing those things. So he hired people to write libretti
Mhm.
for him. And he paid. And then not only did he pay singers, but if he if a singer came to him and was like, "I need money," he would give them loans to be able to for their careers, and like
Mhm.
he did those things. And at a time period when he wasn't making money, what he would do is write parlor songs to
Mhm.
get like 50 cents or $1 or whatever. And then all that money would go back into his opera company in order to possibly give loans to singers to help them along their way.
Wow.
So he was also a philanthropist. He really did these things for us and the culture, and and so I thought, well, he has to have a foundation, and people have to know who he is, because if not, then we don't. I mean, like you're like the discovery of, wow, this person was the same when I did his opera in 2015, Voodoo, and I was like, who is this man? And these amazing things that he's like, it was just really crazy.
Wow.
It's mind blowing to me that we don't know anything about this person, when like he is the person who was writing American opera years before basically anyone else. Because again, that person I found was a person who wrote an opera here in the States, but he, wrote an Italian opera. Because if we think about it, in the 1800s, what music was available to people? So the music, other than like people writing slave songs and spirituals and stuff like that, and singing that kind of stuff, it wasn't written; it was just sung. But European music was on our radios.
Mhm.
So then, so like, classical things, opera, but whatever European music was on, because America really didn't have at that point, like I mean, they had some kind of music, but it wasn't really like our foundation of what we call American music now.
Mhm. I'm gonna have to put these glasses on because the computer, it messes with my eyes. It keeps
Okay.
blinding me. I don't like the glare, but I have to do something. Wow, that's so interesting, Barry. And I wish you much luck in getting the foundation started. Um,
Thank you.
that is so awesome. There is a lot of history that we don't know about, that a lot of people are bringing to light now with, the Black Lives Matter movement and other movements. So I am so happy, and I hope to hear more about your foundation, and maybe you can share more about music history with us, at a later date. I'm pretty sure that would be an
Absolutely.
interesting topic, for people to hear about. Um, so now I want to kind of switch gears and show, the audience some of your work and your fantastic voice. So I'm going to share the screen here. And, this is Albrecht Aria. Am I saying that correct?
Yeah, Albert.
Albrecht.
Um,
Okay.
yeah. So Albert Aria. So I'll just give you a little background really quickly about this. So when I was talking about operas in the vernacular, so this summer festival, Pittsburgh Festival Opera, they do all their operas in English in the summer, and this is a Wagner opera, Richard Wagner opera, Das Rheingold, but here is the Rheingold. And if anyone is familiar with the Lord of the Rings, this opera is like the first of those installments of the Lord of the Rings. Wagner wrote his Ring Cycle, which is 4 operas. This is the first of the 4, and my character is basically the Gollum character. So I went down and stole this gold nugget from the Rhine Maidens, and I had it fashioned into um, a golden ring, a ring. And this ring gives me all this power. And so the gods are like, who this 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 like dwarf is running around like doing all these things and getting and like controlling the earth, and when we're supposed to be the people doing that. So then they decided that they would take my ring from me. The character who decided this is Wotan. He is the king of the gods, and so he's come down to take my ring. So he kind of like traps me, and they steal my ring and all this stuff. So at this aria is the end of my final scene where Wotan has stolen my ring from me, and he has put it on himself, and I am now cursing the ring to tell him that it would never bring him any kind of luck at all. And it was fun doing this opera. It was really, really fun. The colleagues showed up and didn't know their stuff and did not know their things from the beginning or to the end, but that's neither here nor there. But but I enjoyed doing this. It was my first Wagner opera of many, and I'm really excited to share this with you. This art and this in English, and this aria starts off with "Am I now free?" because he's been enchained for quite some time, and then he starts to like basically curse the ring, and yeah, it's very dramatic. It shows acting and the voice and everything. So enjoy.
Okay, I'm gonna hit play now. So is that you lying down?
Yes, that's me on the ground.
Okay.
Am I now free? Truly free. I greet you then in my freedom. Mark my words. Since a curse gained it for me, my curse lies on this ring. Oh, it's home, return to me. Let now it bring my pain, and to its Lord, its mercy, measure to none. Let the fortunate owner enjoy its gleam. Cheer shall consume the man who commands it, and mortal envy consume those who don't. Striving vainly to win that prize, and he who obtains it shall find no joy, it will bring no gain to explore. Only death is hated, doomed by the curse on the ring. And while he lives, fears will fill all his days. Oh, till the cold returns to this hand from which you have torn it. In anguish and sore distress, the negro blessed as his ring. You hold now, guard it with care. From my curse, you can't escape.
That was beautiful. Wow. Let me try to stop it. Here, play some next.
Voilà un artiste qui, vous allez le voir, ne se...
Wow, I really enjoyed that. So cool.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really interesting because so you hear my voice. So I usually don't speak like this all the time because I feel like it's a little extra. So, but my voice is that, and I speak, I'm like, oh, how you? I'm just like happy-go-lucky Barry. And
Mhm.
so so usually when people meet me, they're like, oh, are you a tenor? I'm like, no, I'm not a tenor. And when I go to sing, they're like, oh my gosh, your voice is so like big and deep and round. And I'm like, yeah, you know, but I don't always speak that way because I think it's obnoxious, to be
Wow.
honest with you. Especially, I feel like that's my stage and performance voice, and then my regular voice is just me talking to regular people.
Wow, that was
Yeah.
really awesome. So, viewers, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. The last question is for me, and it is, what are the resources the library offers people who are new to the job market? Maybe you're changing careers or looking for new work due to the COVID-19 emergency. Well, you can visit us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at pgcmls.info. You can go to our online library, our jobs and careers section, and then from there, you'll see Brain Fuse, Career Transitions, and the Learning Express Library. You can complete a career assessment, search for jobs, create resumes, get expert feedback. There's a job coach available on our Job Now section. And then there's also resources for veterans to navigate the Department of Veterans Affairs, prepare for college, and brush up on any job skills. There's step-by-step guidance to discovering your interests, maybe choosing a new career, preparing your resume, finding schools and programs, searching for job options, and much more. So please visit us at our website. Again, it's at pgcmls.info. Use your library card number to access all of those great digital resources. Again, thank you, Barry, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for
Viewers,
having me.
yes, viewers, thank you for joining us each and every Wednesday. We have a new career chat to explore with you. So we hope you will join us, and we'll see you again next time. Bye for now. Stay safe. Thank you.